Hello everyone, and welcome to another beer review, and Happy New Year to everyone. So we're back on the kind of Christmas beer review part 2, which is this is the one that's been conditioned with Muscovado sugar primer in a pressurised cask, and I've just poured it, and that's what we've got, you see. And of course we've got a bottle of Old Peculier, which I can't buy at my local Tesco's anymore. They used to sell it in bottles and cans, now they don't sell it at all. So I've got to drive an extra 18 miles to buy it at another supermarket. How good is that? That's good, isn't it? Share of shit. So, if you don't remember it, this is Old Peculier. It's an unpasteurised, cold filtered dark ale from Theakston's. It's 500ml, 5.6%, and it's roughly about £182 a bottle. So let's pull this one out and see what this is like. I've got to admit, it's not always the best in bottles or cans. It's a lot nicer obviously in the cask. It has a kind of a sweetish kind of aftertaste usually, and yeah, so there's a slight difference. This is obviously a slightly more tanned coloured head, as you can see, and this is obviously a bit lighter in the head, but they're both quite well carbonated this time, because I did this as a pressurised conditioning, so it was in a pressurised basically cask or keg, whatever you want to call it. I think it's a cask. And yeah, well, we'll start off with this one and see what it's like. Good thing it doesn't have the banana flavour, which is good. So here's the original. Right, there is some similarities, but there's also some how would you say, stark differences. But not in a bad way, in a strange way, but not in a bad way. The first thing I'm getting is there is a difference in flavour intensity, and I started with my Christmas beer first and then went to the kind of original Old Peculier, and I noticed that the Old Peculier is just slightly weaker in flavour intensity, and it is sweeter. It's still sweeter than the one that I brewed, and the one that I brewed does have a slightly more bitterness to the aftertaste than the original. The original has a lot more sweetness to the aftertaste. So that's two things I kind of get as real major differences. Yeah, I mean, there's a sweetness to this, but there is just more flavour. I mean, some of the Old Peculier flavour profiles are there, but they're a little bit stronger than the original. Carbonation, probably a little bit more in the Old Peculier bottle version. I mean, this is just nicely carbonated, just not too much, and obviously it's more than it was with the first one, which was the original kind of conditioning without anything added. That it went a bit wrong actually, and it wasn't particularly good. But I was obviously a little bit more with the carbonation here, and I think it's gained from that. Now, breaking down the flavours of the Christmas beer, because I'm going to break down these flavours. I won't break down the flavours so much of the Old Peculier because I've already reviewed that previously, and I will put that in the video. I'll put that at the end of the video, a link to that. So yeah, let's kind of break this down. Right. You start off with a nice malty sweetness, dark roasted malts, all the box being ticked quite nice. They both kind of start off quite similar. The flavour is just a little bit more intense with the Christmas beer compared to the Old Peculier. Then it moves on to the mid-tongue, and again things are kind of settling down. You've still got the kind of malty sweetness, but it's kind of dialed back a little bit. It's kind of relaxed and scaled itself back a bit. You have the kind of dark roasted grains coming through now. And with that, you're just getting a little bit of bitterness, just a little bit of bitterness. But again, this is kind of more grain bitterness, not hop bitterness. And then it moves on to the aftertaste, and this is where it changes. You do start to get a little bit of hoppy bitterness coming through in the aftertaste. There is a bit of sweetness there, but the sweetness hasn't intensified in any way, shape or form. It's still kind of the same kind of levels as the mid-tongue. This is it before it starts to dissipate. So the sweetness is there, but you've got this bitterness, which is, it takes the edge off the sweetness, because if you look at it, the bitterness is just a bit more stronger, a bit more intense than the actual kind of sweetness at the end, which is the exact opposite of what you get with Old Peculier. Old Peculier is a more kind of sweet forward kind of finish at the end. The aftertaste, there is more sweetness and bitterness, and it's something you do notice because it's more unusual. You expect to have more of a bitter aftertaste, but you don't get that with the Old Peculier. You're actually getting more sweetness, whereas my Christmas beer is the other way about. You're getting a little bit more bitterness. It's not strong bitterness, but if you compare it to the original, it does stand out that there is a more bitter finish to it than a sweet finish. The sweetness is there, but it is being overshadowed and overpowered by the bitterness, which of course, if you don't like such a sweet finish to a beer, then this is actually probably more suitable to you. But we're trying to get it to see if this recipe was kind of close to the original, and at the moment some parts are, other parts aren't, to be totally honest. In fact, the front of the mouth is fairly close. The mid-tongue, it's close, but not as close as the front of the mouth. And then obviously when it goes on to the aftertaste, it really is just kind of go in the opposite directions. So yes, they're like different beers in the aftertaste. So that gives you an idea of what's actually happening. Is it a nice beer? Yeah, it is. How do I compare it to the Old Peculier? Well, it's a bit of a different animal. In this format, it's a bit of a different animal. It's like, I'm not saying they're chalk and cheese, they're not that far apart. They are obviously similar beers, but there's enough of a difference to kind of make it more difficult to kind of compare the two to a certain degree. And while I still like Old Peculier, compared to this, Old Peculier is just that little bit watery, just because of the flavours aren't as intense, so it feels that kind of slightly watery. This one, it's quite difficult because I'm going from a sweet aftertaste to a kind of more bitter aftertaste back and forward. It's making it quite difficult for the mouth to acclimatise to it, to my Christmas beer. I like it, and I think I would like it if I wasn't drinking Old Peculier, because Old Peculier has given me this kind of false flag of kind of resetting the palate every time I take a sip of the Old Peculier. Whereas if I stick with this, It's nice. It's actually quite well balanced for a what we call a home brew. But again, it's not really quite a home brew because, of course, you are kind of working to the same principles as a brewery does. So you're actually working with the raw grains and everything else. So, and you are multiple hopping and everything else, which of course you wouldn't do with a lot of these kind of homebrew kits and things like this. So you actually are following a kind of set recipe, and you're actually going through all the different kind of individual processes, the same as they do in a brewery. You're just doing it on a smaller scale. And it's also being conditioned in the proper kind of vessels as well. And the same type of thing is what you would do in a brewery. It's just everything is just scaled down, but you're using all the kind of right equipment and things like that. So from that point of view, yeah, I quite like it. As long as I don't go near the old Peculier, because the old Peculier just kind of upsets the mouth for it. Because it's like, you go into sweetness, and then of course this tastes more bitter than it really is, because I'm going from a sweeter aftertaste to a slightly bitter aftertaste. But because I'm doing that, the bitterness in this just tastes a bit more intense than it actually really is. Whereas if I just stick with this and keep with this, then it's actually quite nice and quite drinkable. The thing I have noticed is, I think it's a bit higher in alcohol now. The thing was though, with the carry-ons I was having with it and just the length of time, I just couldn't be arsed. I'll be totally honest, I couldn't be arsed doing the gravity tests and all that type of stuff. So I didn't take the gravity on the basis of comparing the fermentation point. I think I did take the gravity, I'm trying to remember, I wrote it down, but I need to have a look. I did take the gravity, obviously, with the wort, because I've got to kind of check to make sure we've actually reached the right type of extraction, because obviously if the wort isn't up to the right gravity, then there's no chance I'm going to basically make it up in the fermentation. I'm always going to be basically chasing my tail, and I'm never going to get there. But I didn't take the gravity after fermentation to see where it was sitting at before I did any kind of conditioning and things like that, because I just couldn't be arsed. Plus, like I said, I had other things going on with treacle all over the bloody kitchen. So, yeah, I had other things occupying me at the time, and I thought the gravity, to be totally honest, because really, I'm not in the mood. As I'm basically scraping up treacle all over the floor, kitchen units, all that kind of stuff, you know, before the wife gets back. So, yes, I do feel that this is slightly a higher alcohol content. Now, normally it is 5.6 for the original. This does feel a bit more weightier. I would probably say this is probably maybe 6%, maybe slightly a bit more actually, to be totally honest. And probably, now I'll be totally honest, usually adding sugar primers and things like this, it doesn't really add to the alcohol content when you're conditioning, which then makes me think it was probably all kind of already probably a bit too high. It was a strange one though, because you would think, no, I'm trying to remember, did I did take the gravity before I added the candied sugar, and it was already kind of spot on then, and then I dissolved the Belgian candied sugar in it, so that's obviously, you know, going to increase the gravity quite a bit as well. So yes, there's a good chance that this is probably closer to at least 6, maybe getting towards 6.5%. But yes, I do notice that this is a bit more fruitier than the original, and it wasn't planned. I'll be totally honest, that was an accident. That's a fortuitous mistake, as I say, a happy little accident. But yeah, marks out of 10. This is nice, so it's getting sweeter now. So as it's getting sweeter, then I'm staying off the original, because I'm getting more sweetness from this now as the mouth gets a chance to acclimatise, and it's actually tasting nicer and nicer as it is getting more acclimatised. So my view with this one is, if you want to enjoy my Christmas brews, keep away from the original. It's probably the best kind of advice I can give you. Yes, it tastes really nice as long as you don't go near Old Peculier, which maybe kind of defeats the purpose, but in its own right, it's actually quite a nice beer, and it's quite a nice recipe, and I really enjoy kind of making it, even though I enjoy it now more that I've got a little bit of success compared to the disaster that was with the first part that was reviewed, which was, I think I gave it 3 out of 10 because it was quite a bit away from the original, and yeah, something had gone wrong. I mean, well, I know something had gone wrong. It had actually gone wrong. What I was getting was I was suffering from yeast stress. Now, it wasn't yeast stress coming from the point of view that, because there's 2 forms of yeast stress. You can get yeast stress from it's too high a fermentation temperature for the yeast, and it stresses out, and that's when you start getting high amounts of esters being produced. And of course, one of the famous esters gives you a kind of banana flavour. Now, obviously, if that increases, then it changes from bananas to what we call kind of chemical, really kind of quite chemical and really quite off. I mean, there's nothing wrong with producing some esters to get certain flavours like banana and things like that. That's not a problem, and there is little hints and accents of banana in the original Old Peculier because they do set that up a little bit just to produce that, and they work with the yeast and they alternate the actual fermentation temperatures at certain times just to get these effects, and they do manipulate it, and that's a normal part of brewing. The problem is with my yeast, it spent too long at 4 degrees C. Now, that's another way of getting yeast stress, because what happens is water. Now, this is a great kind of thing. You know, I'm quite sad from this point of view, and a lot of people don't realise this, that water, and this is the reason why we have life on this planet. It's one of the big reasons we have life on this planet, because without this kind of, how would you call it, phenomenon, then life wouldn't exist on this planet. But the thing is, 4 degrees C with water is a golden number, because water's at its most densest at 4 degrees C. Now, you would think that when water becomes ice, it's actually more dense, and it's not. The molecules are more tightly packed at 4 degrees C than they are when they're actually ice. That's the thing. Now, the thing is, though, that's the great phenomenon of water, is at 4 degrees C it's more denser than at any other point, and the molecules are tightly packed and it's more dense, but it still remains a liquid. And that's the reason why we basically get certain things like photosynthesis and all this type of stuff, and it really is quite important. The problem is, though, yeast doesn't like to be basically harassed like that, and at 4 degrees C, I think probably with that cold snap it spent a bit too much time at 4 degrees C and gave the yeast a bit of a pounding, and the yeast was getting a bit stressed, so it was going basically off its tits, and yeah, it produced a larger amount of esters than it really should have done. And well, let's be told, as I paid the price of my lethargy and can't be arsed after shoot, and just, well, put it this way, thank God it was a beer, not a child, because it was just sheer neglect from my part. So I'm laughing about it because it's a beer. If it was a child, then I'd probably be arrested. So there you go. Not so good, but I'm happier with this one. This is actually more drinkable. This is where I wanted to be, because I know that there was no kind of problems with the fermentation initially, because we were drinking it as a fresh beer. Me and Adrian were drinking it, and yes, it was very drinkable and everything else. Yes, we wanted the more flavours to develop, and we wanted the intensity and everything else to kind of build with the conditioning. But as a freshly brewed beer that had only been brewed a week before, we drank quite a few pints of it, and yeah, it was fine and very nice. So from that point of view, yeah, so I'm happier with this kind of position. Now, we will have another one coming up. That's this is the last one in the Christmas beer series, and this one has been conditioned with a molasses. Now, this was recommended by a viewer, and he left all the kind of information in his comments, and that's why we did it. So not only do I read the comments and I respond to them, I also take them on board, and I'm quite happy to give them a try. So if people have any suggestions or any ideas, feel free to put them in the comments, because I do read them, I do take them on board, and yeah, I'm quite happy to give them a try. You know, the proof of the pudding is in the tasting, so give it a go. That's my kind of view. So if anybody has any ideas or any suggestions, I like brewing beer and I like to have a bit of fun, but if anybody has any suggestions, or maybe if they like the kind of brewing, the kind of home brewing part, and want me to kind of do a little bit more, or have any suggestions, or want me to try and make some stuff, then yeah, feel free, add it to the comments and I'll give it a go. I can't guarantee it'll be any good, I can't guarantee it'll work out well, but at the end of the day, I'm quite happy to give it a go. We'll see where we end up. But yeah, this one, it is very drinkable, and it is nice, and the bitterness and the aftertaste isn't so strong as it is after drinking the original. So what would I give this out of 10? Now I wanted to be close to the kind of 6s and 7s. Am I though? Well, I'm well above the 3s, thank God for that. I mean, this one isn't a 3. If you look at it from the point of view of what it cost me to make this beer, and the time and everything else, and to a certain degree, excluding the treacle incident, that it was actually quite enjoyable and quite fun, but it did take a bit of time. It actually works out quite cheap. So on the basis of, it's a very drinkable beer, there's a good price to it. Is it like Old Peculier? There is some flavours that are similar to Old Peculier, but no, I wouldn't say it's the same as Old Peculier. Not this version anyway. Now this could be down to the condition, or it could be down to the recipe. We'll find out with the next one to see where we are with that one. But with this one, I would say it is a bit away from the original in certain aspects. But it's a good drinkable beer. It's quite affordable. In general, I would say the recipe is actually quite good and it was quite fun to make. So on that basis, all in, I would probably give this a 6. It's very drinkable, quite moreish. The problem is it's probably a higher alcohol than it should be, and while there's a benefit to that, because of the style of beer it's supposed to be more of a kind of sessionable ale and get wired in, it's kind of lost a bit of that because of there is a higher alcohol content, so it's kind of lacking from that point of view, which is a bit of a shame. So it is. So yes, I think if the alcohol content was lower, then yes, it would be easily a 6, maybe pushing on to a 7. Unfortunately, this is just kind of scraping in at a 6, just because of that. And the gravity, well, I was working with their recipe and they said, well, the gravity should have been this point with what we call the finish wort before you add any kind of additional flavours. The problem is if you're adding Belgian candy sugar at the end, well, that's going to really change the gravity. So if you're already hitting the gravity with the kind of basic wort before you add any kind of what we call additional additive or natural flavours, then of course, I mean, there's other flavours you could add that wouldn't affect the gravity whatsoever. But if I'm adding, you know, quite a large amount of candied Belgian sugar, or Belgian candied sugar, whichever you want to put it, then of course, yes, it's going to affect the gravity and this, your kind of output. If the fermentation processes, which is good, and it is good because I kept it at a constant because I was staring at the bloody, I actually had the fermentation vessel in the living room, so when I was watching television I was staring at it. So I knew exactly the temperature all the time because I'm staring at it. I can see the thermometer. So I knew exactly where, and it just never moved. It was sitting there quite happy, just at a nice, perfect temperature. But on the basis of that, it was obviously a good fermentation, and obviously it built up the alcohol. And the problem was, is we probably didn't notice it so much with the fresh beer at the time being aged because we were drinking other beers. we were having a bit of a session, and we thought, well, we'll try some of the fresh stuff and see what it's like. And I'll be totally honest, we actually had to fill the actual the beer machine keg twice. Now it holds 5 litres, so it gives you an idea of what happened. So I think we lost 10 litres of the fresh stuff. So it gives you an idea that it was going down quite well. So, and, but yeah, and yeah, we didn't really notice the higher alcohol content so much, but I am noticing it now. And that's kind of affected a little bit of it as well. So there's been some positive gains, but there's also been some little detractions as well. So yes, a 6 out of 10, but it's kind of scraping that. It's not a good confident 6 out of 10. I would say it's more than an average beer. It's higher than 5, and it's just scraping into the 6 by its basically fingernails. It's not a confident 6 and definitely not getting anywhere near a 7. So yeah, 6 out of 10, and I think that's the best I can actually give it. It's not really like Old Peculier. There is some similarity, kind of flavour profiles, but it's not really the same. But like I said, it was a good idea, and I thank the viewers with the comments that suggested it, and I've had fun doing it. So thanks for the suggestions, and thanks for all the kind of little tips as well. So hopefully in the next few days we'll be doing, because I'm going to clear this keg out, probably won't take long, and then I can get the last one in and we'll do that. So probably the next couple of days we'll be doing part 3, and we'll see what it's like with the actual treacle, and hopefully to God the treacle actually turns out better, because the bloody hassle this bloody treacle gave me, because I made an arse of it because I spilt it everywhere. And I mean, I really spilt it everywhere. The Jackson Pollocked it, the bloody treacle everywhere. Hopefully it's been worth all the blooming hassle, because if I can still have basically remember me basically crawling about the kitchen, scraping it off everywhere, because I had to scrape it off first before I could actually wipe it, because it was so thick. And treacle just doesn't wipe when it starts to cool. It just, fuck you, I'm not doing nothing. So yeah, I hope to God this one actually, the treacle one turns out better than this one, because it's a lot more bloody hassle due to the fact I made an arse of it. But anyway, I'm now basically waffling on. So yes, it's a 6 out of 10 just. I'm happier because it's better than the 3 out of 10 previously. So, thanks for watching, cheers, and bye for now.